For the past couple of weeks, I've been in Bali, and this time around for my travels, I got a pretty special lens from Sony. A lens that a lot of people seem to overlook. And if you've seen my previous videos, you know that I shoot with all kinds of focal lengths. Anything from as wide as 16, 24, even 10 millimeters, and going all the way up to 70. But this lens that I got my hands on is pretty special. 70 to 200 millimeters F4.0 G Lens. This lens has been a pleasant surprise, and it's slowly becoming one of my new favorite lenses. This video is not sponsored by Sony, but they were kind enough to let me borrow this for a whole month. And even though they didn't ask me to create anything, I thought, I don't know, why not make a video about it? So let's get into it. If you've been shooting for a while, you've probably heard of a term called the lens trifecta. It's a set of lenses that covers the whole focal range that you might need, starting from wide angle, then you have medium, and you have the telephoto. And 70 to 200 is the telephoto end of the spectrum. And if you're a professional, in particular, someone who is in the travel niche, maybe sports, this lens is probably an essential. Which brings me on to two reasons why I think that's the case. First, the 70 to 200 lens massively changes the way you have to shoot, especially if you're going for a more isolated subject kind of look. And don't get me wrong, I do have the 24 to 70 and it does deliver similar results, but I find that the issue with 70 millimeters is that you kind of have to be close to the subject anyway. With this 70 to 200, you can really be far and incognito without really intruding on the scene. I do believe that there's a certain magic to candid shots, and 70 to 200 delivers exactly that. And then second is something that I've been really enjoying with this lens is the macro feature. At 0.42 meters or 1.38 feet, you can get really close to the subject. Previously, I relied on diopter filters and they do work great, but I find that you lose a bit of sharpness around the edges, which could be classed as character. So having an option to shoot up close without needing any filters is quite a nice feature to have. I'll go over the lens form factor, the image quality, as well as if it's the right lens for you. But before that, I wanted to briefly touch on today's sponsor, Motion Ray. I've been using Motion Ray for the past 2 years, and it's an all-in-one platform for motion graphics, transitions, and any overlays. However, this time around, I wanted to show you 3 of my new favorite overlays that I think can help you with editing your videos. The first one that I've been using for my Instagram Reels recently has been the 16:9 camera viewfinder overlay. To use it, you can either drag it on top of your sequence and freeze frame it to get that vintage feel, and you can take it a step further by also introducing a film border like so. Also, the cool thing about this graphic is the fact that it has a built-in shutter click. So to smoothen out a hard cut and make it more seamless, you can overlay this graphic on top and make the transition slightly faster. The second graphic I actually found whilst I was making this video is a 32mm lens flare. You can emphasize the look and feel of a certain clip by using masks, but nothing beats a real lens flare. So drag it on top of your video, resize it, and speed it up to really pull off a sunny look. Finally, the last asset I want to share with you is a pack of 24 cartoon effects. Now, if you make videos, chances are your style is completely different to mine, and that's exactly what this pack is about. It allows you to add a fun twist to any transitions, titles, and any pop-ups you'd want to see on the screen. All of these assets are available on Motion Ray, which is membership based, so you can get it for a year or a month and have all the assets ready to be used. And if you're not sure, you can also sign up for free. Now, you won't have access to all of the assets, but the selection is still pretty big. I'll leave a link to Motion Ray in the description below, so if you're interested, make sure to check it out. Okay, moving on to the hands-on first impressions of this lens. As you'd expect from Sony's G lineup, this is a meticulously well-designed lens. It is built using high-quality plastic material and features that classic off-white look that you'd see in all of the longer focal ranges. It has 5 switches, 3 of which are for focusing and 2 of which are for stabilization. It also features 3 custom buttons next to the focus ring, which all can be customized to different things. It has a lock button to prevent the lens from zooming out. And speaking of zooming, unlike the 70 to 200 G II, the lens zooms out externally. It features a plastic bracket that you can attach to a tripod. The lens is optically stabilized and it's also weather sealed. So if you take it to a rainy place like Bali, you should be fine, in theory. Now, when it comes to the dimensions of this lens, the lens itself is 6 by 3 inches and it weighs at around 800 grams, which is around 1.7 pounds. That is considerably lighter than the G II lens, which I think comes at around 2.5 pounds. And this lens is also a macro lens with a minimum focus distance of 0.26 meters, which is around 0.86 feet, which makes this a dual purpose lens. Now, one thing I wish I knew sooner when I got this lens is the fact that it's a 72mm filter thread. So if you're like me that uses lenses that have 77 and 82mm, make sure you get a step-up ring before you set off on your adventure. And honestly, my favorite part about this lens specifically is the size. I do have the 24, actually, let me get it. I do have the 24-70 G Master II lens, and even though it is bigger and chunkier, it's a lot smaller than the G Master II 70-200, which makes it a lot easier for me to justify putting this in a bag, especially when I travel and when the weight is kind of limited. All this makes it seem like the lens is flawless, and that's not really true. Compared to the G Master II lens, the autofocus is not as fast. It has a constant aperture of 4, meaning that it doesn't let in as much light, and it doesn't have the edge-to-edge sharpness of a G Master II lens. But all of these things are something that I can live without. With the Sony FX3, I can crank up the ISO, the autofocus is fast enough, and when I film videos, I don't really care about edge-to-edge sharpness as much. So it really depends on what you're looking for. Which brings me on to, is this the lens for you? I would say that depends on 2, maybe 3 factors. Number 1, if you already have the 16-35 and the 24-70 lens, this would probably be your next logical step. However, if you don't have one of those 2 lenses, I'll probably consider getting one of those first. Number 2, what are you looking for in a lens? Can you get by with an f4 constant aperture? And are you happy to sacrifice some of the features you'd get in a better G Master II counterpart? If so, I think this is a great choice, especially if you consider the price that you can get this at. In the US, that's around $1,850, and in the UK, you'd pay around £1,650. And number 3 is, do you really need this lens for the work that you create? Putting the want aside, will your work get considerably better if you were to use a 70-200? Now, if you're a travel, wildlife, or sports photographer, this is probably going to be one of the first lenses you're going to get. But for someone who does everyday cinematics, can you get by with just a 70 or 85mm lens? And I think the ideal person for this lens is someone who wants to capture super tight shots and really separate the subject from the background, someone who has the fundamental setup already and wants to add another focal range to their set, or someone who wants to capture the scenes without interrupting the natural flow by being up close. And that's an overview of this lens. If you do have any questions, drop them in the comments below. And I appreciate you watching this video. So if you enjoyed the video, consider liking and subscribing. Currently, I'm in Bali until the end of March, so I can't wait to show you all the content that I create. But for now, that is it. But I find